Hey everyone, welcome to our channel, Cleared and Shipped, where freight and logistics stop confusing and start making sense. Hey, whether you're a clearing agent trying to stay on top of customs regulations, a business owner trying to navigate through the cost of shipping your cargo, or someone who is new in international trade, this channel was built for you. Every week, we break down real challenges faced in the logistics industry, from freight rate calculation and Incoterms, documentation, customs clearance, and everything in between. No jargon, no fluff, just clear and practical knowledge that you can use in the right way. Subscribe and join a growing community of trade professionals and business owners who are taking control of their logistics. So, have you ever shipped something by air? And when you got an invoice from the carrier or freight forwarder, it is way too much to what you expected to get. You looked at your package, well, it is bulky, but it is not something that is heavy. If that has ever happened to you, this video is going to explain to you exactly why the airline chose to charge you a higher value compared to what you expected. And we are going to know by the end of this video how freight rates are calculated. By the end of this video, you will understand why airlines decide to charge you whatever they charge you, and you'll be able to know the difference between actual and volumetric weight. And you yourself, you'll be able to calculate the rates that you'll be charged given the figures that are given to you by the airlines. So let's dive into this, starting with the golden rule of air freight. So the golden rule of air freight is, in shipping, space matter the same way as weight. Therefore, let me explain to you what exactly they mean by space mean the same way as weight. When cargo airlines get your loads, or when they are going to load planes, they look at two things. That is the weight of your cargo, and then they look at the volume of your cargo. So, number one, we are going to look at the volume of your cargo. How much space is your cargo going to occupy in the aeroplane? So the airline will ask themselves that question. How much space is this cargo going to occupy in the aircraft? Then they will compare that with how much weight of the total weight of the aircraft this cargo is going to occupy in the aircraft. Therefore, they will need to compare between the actual and the volume, and whichever is higher is what they will take. Let me explain what that means. When an airline or freight carrier loads into cargo in the plane, they have two limitations. Number one, the airline or the aircraft has weight limitation. Those are the many kilograms an aeroplane can carry before it becomes unsafe to load any more cargo. Number two is the space. That is the space that can be occupied in an aircraft. Therefore, regardless of whether they have more cargo and more space in the aircraft, when they reach the weight limit of an aircraft, they cannot add any more, even if they have more space. And then when they reach the volume capacity of an aircraft, it means actually they cannot add any more thing in that aircraft. Therefore, they have to balance between volume and the actual to see whether they maximize profits. So imagine you have a box of feathers. It could be looking huge in size, but when you put it on a weighing scale, it weighs something little. So the airline in that case will charge you based on the volume that you are going to occupy in the aircraft than charging you on actual weight. But on the flip side of the same, you might be having a small box of bolts, nuts. When it is small, when actually it is weighing more kilograms than the big volume of feathers that we have just seen. Maybe it is a small tiny box like this, but weighing over 50 kgs. In that case, the airline will look at the actual weight, because the airline will reach its weight limitation capacity before actually the whole aircraft is filled with cargo. So let's look at now actual weight against volumetric weight. So to understand these two terms, you need to look at two things. When we are looking at actual weight, we lift the package as it is. When it is packaged properly, that is the item and the box, put on a weighing scale. Whatever weight we get becomes our actual weight. So that one looks to be pretty simple. And then when it comes to volume weight, then it means we are going to get the volume of this package, which is about the length, the width, and the height of the consignment, and then convert it back to kilograms to be able to establish the volumetric weight of the package. Here we have two cases. We can weigh back into kilograms, or we can weigh back into pounds. The reason behind that is that when IATA is issuing tariffs, airline tariffs, they issue them in kilograms and pounds. The first tariff is for the for the USA and North Americas, and then the second tariff is for the rest of the world. So in the rest of the world, cargo is weighed in kgs, but in North America, cargo is weighed in pounds. That is why we may need to convert volume from volumes to kilograms, or from volume to pounds. So depending on where you're shipping, that is what you have to do. So how do we do this? Because airline is not just selling you weight capacity, but also charges you the space in the aircraft, then you need to know how to calculate the volume. So like I said, you take the greatest length of the package, the greatest width of the package, and the greatest height of the package. And I'll share with you the formula in just a minute. So let's look at some simple math on how to go about this. The formula for converting dimensions that are captured in centimeters is you get the greatest length, the greatest width, and the greatest height, and you divide that by the factor for conversion from volume to kilograms, which is 6,000. These factors are issued by IATA. And if you have measured using inches, then the factor changes from 6,000 to 366. Now, depending on what measuring unit you have used, you must use the right factor for you to be able to arrive to the right weight you want in terms of kilograms or in terms of pounds. The standards we have are centimeters and inches. However, if you found yourself, maybe you had a client and they issued you their dimensions in maybe meters or millimeters, you just have to convert back to centimeters and inches for you to be able to now use the right factor to divide and convert from volume to kilograms or pounds. So let's look at one example. Assuming you are shipping a box that has the following dimensions: length at 60 centimeters, width at 50 centimeters, and height at 40 centimeters. All you have to do is to multiply them together. That is 60 by 50 by 40. And the answer you get will be the volume in terms of cubic centimeters. The word cube is to simply mean the length, the width, and the height. Step number 2 after getting the total volume is to divide that volume by the right factor. In this case, we have used centimeters, and the right factor is 6,000. And the answer you will get will be the total volume weight in terms of kgs of that package. So if you get 6,000, rather if you get 60 by 50 by 40 and divide it by 6,000, the answer you will get is 20 kilograms. So in simple terms, that means your box in terms of volume weight is weighing 20 kilograms. Now let's say the same box that we have weighed had an actual weight of 8 kilograms. So which one do you think the airline will charge? Because we earlier told you they look at whichever is higher between volume and actual. And now looking at our example, if our box had actual weight of 8 kilograms and we calculated our volume and arrived at 20 kilograms, then the airline would definitely charge you 20 kilograms. So the rate that they will provide with you will be the rate of 20 kilograms. Because the rule is very simple, they will charge you whichever is higher between actual and the volume. Why? Because this box, remember we told you earlier that airlines they don't only sell weight, but they sell space. So why are they charging you 20 kgs? Because your cargo is going to occupy an equivalent space of 20 kilograms on their weight capacity. In simple terms, that's what that means. Now let's go on the flip side of the same. Assuming we are using the same dimensions, 60 by 50 by 40 in terms of dimensions. When you multiply all those, you get 1200,000. And then when you divide that by 6,000, you get 20 kgs. Now assuming our actual weight was 35 kgs, and then the volume is 20. The golden rule is saying they will charge you whichever is higher between actual and the volume. And in this case, if the assumption was our actual weight was 35 kgs, then it would mean this time they will charge you based on actual, because it is higher than the volumetric weight. So if you are to compare the two, you see where we have been charged based on actual and where we have been charged based on volume. What you need to understand is that their basis is always going to be that the aircraft, if they are to charge you on actual weight, the aircraft will reach its maximum weight capacity for cargoes that are small and heavy before it reaches its volume capacity, which means they will have to account for unsold space. And when your cargo is a bulky, much as they are light in terms of actual weight, it means that the airline will fill up properly, and then they will have extra weight that is not sold in terms of actual. Therefore, they will choose to go for volume weight. If your box, another thing you need to look at, if your box is not in what we may call the geometric shapes that we know, because there are cargoes that have irregular shapes. you need to always look at the greatest length of that irregular shape, the greatest width of that irregular shape, and the greatest height of that irregular shape. Take an example. If you are shipping maybe a guitar, it is something that is not in a regular shape, but you put your string from the end to the other end to get the height of that guitar. It doesn't mean that you are going to stop where the strings are, but you have to measure the greatest length, the greatest width, and the greatest height for you to be able to come up with the total volume, because in the aircraft, it is not going to be squeezed there in any way. So they will have to make sure that they maintain the integrity of your product, but at the same time, they have to account for space that is going to be occupied by the item. So, what tip do we have to learn here? If you are shipping something that is light and bulky, try to pack it more compactly, because the more the volume, the more you will be charged. So, if something is light and bulky, make sure that you compact it properly to make sure that the volume that is charged is not way too much from what you expected. So let's look at a real world scenario. Imagine you are in Kampala and you run a business and you are importing branded merchandise from China. These could be t-shirts, capes, bags, and so on. They are in 5 boxes. Their dimensions are 60 by 50 by 50 centimeters. When I say 60 by 50 by 50, I'm incorporating the length, the width, and the height. When you look at those items, they look to be light. In terms of actual weight, they are weighing 6 kilograms. But we said we have 5 boxes of each of those items. So calculating the volumetric weight of these items would mean we get the volume weight by converting the 60 times 50 times 50, which is 150,000. We divide that by the right factor. That means each box will be 25 kilograms. Step number 2 is to compare our weight in terms of volume and our actual weight, which is 6 kilograms per box. So when you look at all those steps, you realize that the actual weight is way below than the volume weight. But remember, we have 5 boxes. Now, we established that our single box weighs 25 kilograms. So we go ahead in the next step and multiply 25 by the 5 boxes that we have given in the scenario. That means our shipment will weigh a total weight of 125 kgs. Therefore, the airline will go ahead and charge you that, because if you are to compare the 125, then actually in the actual we get 6 per box times 5 boxes. That means our actual weight is going to be 30 kgs. So we go back to the golden rule, which says that the airline will charge you whichever is higher between actual and the volume. So when you compare 125 kgs for the total shipment and 30 kgs as actual weight for the total shipment, then the airline, to choose whichever is higher between the two, they will go for the volumetric weight and charge you based on that, because your product is going to occupy more space in the aircraft, which would mean even if they had extra cargo that they could have added, they will not be able to load it there because the airline will be already filled. So chances are there that they are not going to meet the weight capacity of the aircraft, but the volume will be all occupied. All right, let's do a recap of today's session. In shipping, what you need to note, what matters is weight of the package matter the same way as the volume of the package, because airlines can charge you based on both. Whichever is higher is what they will base on. Number two, actual weight is the physical weight of the cargo. That is the shipment itself or the item itself plus its packagings. So once you put it in the box and put it on the scale, what you get as the result is your answer. That is the weight. And then volume weight, we look at the length, the width, and the height of the package, and then that becomes our volume weight. Then we use the right factor to convert from either centimeters into kilograms, or from inches into kilograms, or from inches into pounds. We shall, as we proceed, we shall look at again how we convert the factors we use now to convert from inches to pounds in our next videos. When measuring, always, I repeat, always look at the greatest length, the greatest width, and the greatest height of the package for you to be able to arrive to the right figures. If your shipment is bulky, expect to pay based on volume. And if your shipment is heavy and small, expect to pay based on the actual. So if you found this video helpful, just do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe, such that you help this channel to grow. And if you are here and you want to learn more about freight logistics and international trade, subscribe such that you don't miss the next videos that we are going to be uploading. God bless you.